they said, well, let's recording. Dave, you don't have to record the whole thing. You can just record Alan's talk, but it's your call. The Holocaust, Armenian genocide by Turkey, Rwandan genocide, and many other terrible events are commemorated, and they have speeches and talks. So that's an interesting note. On this past Sunday, and I'll do this in the Kaddish, a woman named Gerda Weissman Klein, who was a very well-known survivor and spokesperson about the Holocaust. She passed away at age 98, can you imagine? And on the positive side, I'm sure you all know that we just witnessed the incredibly historical confirmation of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court. How far we've come since the 1960s, Alan. But we have a long way to go because we also witnessed a lot of racist attacks on her character. And finally, whatever you choose to call it, whether we call it a genocide or a war, we're watching helplessly and very crying all the time, watching the Russians and Putin committing horrific war crimes against the Ukrainian people. So that's what's going on. So if you join me, before we do the, L'chad Odi, join me in Blowing in the Wind on the back page. So the front page is some other readings. And again, I didn't pick this song to go back and sing songs of the 50s and 60s, but because it really does still ring true today. How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? How many seas must the white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? Yes, and how many times must the cannonballs fly before they are forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Yes, and how many years must a mountain exist before it is washed to the sea? How many years can some people exist before they're allowed to be free? Yes, and how many times can a man turn his head and pretend that he just doesn't see? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. Yes, and how many times must a man look up before he can see the sky? And how many years can one man have before he can hear people cry? Yes, and how many deaths will it take till he knows that too many people have died? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind. All right, so now that we have all gotten depressed, let's uplift ourselves with the singing of L'chad Odi. No, I don't feel depressed, but and L'chad Odi, I've said this many times before, is also about faith and rebuilding. And the guys who wrote it, the rabbi who wrote it in 1600s, was thinking about how can we rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And so we're going to do tonight page 20 and 138 at home. We're going to do verse 1 and only verse 1, 4, and 9, the key verses. And for tonight, we're going to do this melody that we've been doing. L'chad Odi likrat kala, Sinai Shabbat nekabela. L'chad Odi likrat kala, Sinai Shabbat nekabela. L'chad Odi likrat kala.
שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשמו לתפארת ולתהילה. לך דודי נקרא כלה, ונשמה מקבלה. לך דודי נקרא כלה, ונשמה מקבלה. התנערי מעפר קומי, לבשי בגדי תפארתך עמי, היד בן ישי בית הלחמי, וזאת נפשי גאולה. לך דודי נקרא כלה, ונשמה מקבלה. לך דודי נקרא כלה, Shabbat. Please rise, we turn towards the back door. Welcome the Shabbat bride. And after that, we'll stay standing for the Baruch Hu. Bohi b'shalom ha'ateret ba'ala, kam b'simcha u'b'tzohala, tochenunei aham segula, bohi chala, bohi chala. Lecha Stay standing as we turn to the Baruch Hu, page 28. That's 146 at home. La 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 la. So the next prayer would normally be, and is, in fact, the Ma'ariv on page 30. And you don't have this reading. I'm going to do one. I just discover things sometimes online. And this one's just jumped out at me. It's based on the Ma'ariv. O God, who rolls light from darkness and darkness from light, eternal teacher, who blesses us with the light of Torah, guide us to shine our spirit of compassion and goodness into the darkness of the human soul, which prevents the growth of understanding and cooperation among us. Open our eyes to see each other as potential partners, where some see only adversaries, neighbors, where some see only strangers, friends, where some see only enemies. As you have commanded us to listen to your word, so may we truly hear one another as we walk along the same path in this world of wonder. Help us to be one as you are one. That's by Rabbi Larry Carroll. So please join me on page 34 or 152 at home for the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. A little softer. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Flip the page. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, v'chol levavecha uv'chol nafshecha, uv'chol me'odecha, v'hayu ha'devarim ha'ele, asher anochi mitzavecha, hayom al-levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha, v'dibarta b'ham, v'shivtecha b'veitecha, uv'lechtecha b'derech, uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha, u'kshartam le'od al yadecha, v'hayu letotafot ben einecha, u'chtavetam al mezuzot beitecha uv'isharecha. Bottom of the page, Leman tiskeruhu vasitem et kol mitzvotai vitem kedoshim lelohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem lelohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem, Adonai Elohechem emet. So I don't have to tell you that next week, Pesach, the Micha Mocha, the story of the Exodus inspired many people, among them the slaves, the people who were enslaved in this country, and people like Nelson Mandela, and so many stories around the world. So the Micha Mocha is a symbol of that time when we were crossing the sea and we had to take a dare. We had to take a risk to break out of our comfort zone and walk through the water. And only, as it says, only when the women had begun singing and dancing and the people had taken that first step did the waters part. We turn to page 40. We're on service number 1, by the way, 40 or 158 at home. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nehedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osef ele, nora tehilot osef ele, malchutecha ra'uvanecha, okeyayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam. Zeli anu ve'amru Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed v'nehemar kifad Adonai et Yaakov u'ge'alo me'ad chazak mimenu baruch ata Adonai ka'al Yisrael. Amen. I would love to do Hashkiveinu on page 42. Instead, let us all just think and pray for the shelter of God's love to be upon the whole world right now, especially on the Ukraine and Eastern Europe. So I'll do the closing of that at the bottom of 42. Baruch ata Adonai, haporeh sukat shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Amen. So flip over or don't flip, but use the front page of the sheet that has Rabbi Secher's photo on it, and at home you have it as well. And one of these readings is in the introduction to the Amidah. So if we can, and unrehearsed, we'll do this not as a responsive reading, but going around the room. Almost all of these, when I was just looking for inspirational readings, I found them, and they were mostly, as it turns out, by another great rabbi who participated in the civil rights movement, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. So, and then the rest are Nelson Mandela and Dr. King. And so this will be our lead into the Amidah. Zev, you want to start?
In any free society where terrible wrong exists, some are guilty, all are responsible.
I'll do one. Indifference to evil is more insidious than evil itself. It is a silent justification affording evil acceptability in society. Go ahead if you want to. You can use the mic, you can say I pass.
Just speak loudly. Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for a minimum of reason.
For many of us, the march from Selma to Montgomery was about protest and prayer. Legs are not lips, and walking is not needed. And yet our legs learned song, even without words, our march was worship. I felt my legs, we were praying.
Prayer cannot bring water to parched fields or mend a broken bridge or rebuild a ruined city. But prayer can water an arid soul, mend a broken heart, and rebuild a weakened will.
Why don't you go for it?
Prayer is meaningless unless it is subversive, unless it seeks to overthrow and to ruin the fears of callousness, hatred, opportunism, and falsehoods. The liturgy movement must become a revolutionary movement seeking to overthrow the forces that continue to destroy the promise, the hope, the vision, all above all.
No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite.
And Jason and Phyllis will finish it up.
We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools.
Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that.
So we rise to the Amidah, page 46 or 164 at home. Adonai, Sifratai Tiftach, Ufi Yahagi Tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. And as always, just go till the end, so when you're all seated, we'll continue. This closes on page 63, more or less. Shalom bimromah, Ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. I apologize if I seem like I'm rushing you. I know some people daven at different paces. Take your time if you're still standing up or you're still davening. We're now going to turn to the Misha Beirach, blessing for healing, and then to our speaker. We have a long list of names. We'll make them very brief, but I want to first say, of course, we send healing to all those people suffering from the COVID and their healers and their caregivers. We send healing to all of the people whose names we don't know in the Ukraine, those who are wounded. And I will say at the end, the Mourner's Kaddish,
There are now 3 deaths from the terrorist attack in Israel, 2 who died at the spot and 1 more. But there were about, I think, 15 or 18 people wounded. For Cheryl Adler, Marvin Rafaela Batsari Menu, Jason Bloomberg, Margot Brown, Patty Burgess, Ed Clark, Eliava Batsara, Ashley Cloud, Cheryl Cohen, Amy Davis, David Shlomo Ben Chaya Yocheved, Sue Dyer, Dorothy Feldman, Lila Galensky, Joe and Priscilla Golden, Marvin Millie Goldhammer, Rivka Chaya Bat Chana Rivka Bat Sarah, Lynn Grimm, Arlene Cohen Harris, Leslie Kay, Babs Klein, Yaakov Ben Menachem, Roger and Patricia McDaniel, Martin Marshevitz, Tom Nesbitt, Einat Batnitza, Donna Pepper, Linnell Phillips, Kelly Priest, Melissa Rayor, Susie Ribnick, Carmen Ridenour, Michael Shea, Amy Simpson, Ava Smith, Tim Solon, Malka Bat Esther, Stephanie Sterling, Joe Thomas, Donna Marie Thornell, that's Ben's mother, Patrick Van, Agnes Weinstein, Howard Willis, Liz Wolf, Patty Wyatt, Benjamin David Ben Talia Ruth, Micah Ben Talia Ruth, Georgia Young, Lisa Zinn, Dwayne Zobel, and it's not on here, my friend Ariella Shira, but Razel, who fell and broke her hip, and Baruch Hashem, she's getting the care that she needs. The Misha Beirach, if you will. Could you help me here again?
253.
What is it? It's 253 is what I always remember, but in their book, it's something else. Okay. I have so many different prayer books. 371 at home. Misha Beirach Avotenu Mekor Averacha of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. I apologize. I did not ask if anybody at home wanted to add a name. Unmute yourself if you wish, or just for tonight, forgive me and know that they're included as well. Me, yes?
Jerry.
Huh?
Jerry Swan.
Jerry. Oh, I didn't ask about all of you as well. I want to make sure that Rabbi Secher has plenty of time and we don't go till 10. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. All right, so get into the way back machine with me to 1969. This is not about me, but about Rabbi Secher, but our connection is a rather interesting one. I was bar mitzvah and confirmed at Temple Israel of Hollywood, a nice big classical reform synagogue, twice the size of this one. But, you know, the rabbis there wore robes and we had a choir and, you know, very classical reform. And my parents had it after my confirmation. And they heard about this maverick rabbi in Northridge who was doing, at that time, something very innovative, slideshows and media, not movies, but, think pieces in his services. And so Alan was ordained, you have the bio in the material there, ordained in 1962. And before I knew him, he had served congregations in New York and Mexico City. Then he came to Los Angeles, as I said, went back to Chicago, which I think is your hometown, and now lives in Montana. And as I said, he was the first rabbi I ever met who was relevant to us kids.
And I think now that it must have said something in my mind unconsciously about what a rabbi could be. And so, Alan, I'm honoring you tonight in that way by having you as my guest. Thank God, you're still here to see it. Another time he hosted Rabbi Shlomo Karlbach at the synagogue, and it was like 10 o'clock before Shlomo got there because they got stuck on the freeway and they walked all the way. And so I attended Alan's post-confirmation classes, where I now remember him telling the story you're going to hear tonight. He left that position after 4 years and went back to Chicago, where he became a media specialist and TV personality. But then he couldn't keep his hands away from synagogues. He founded another synagogue there, Makom Shalom, which still exists today. So we saw each other several times over the years. So let's go back, and he'll tell most of this story. In August of 1962, Dr. King put out a call to clergy of all faiths to join him on a prayer pilgrimage to Albany, Georgia, to support the civil rights movement. And just out of seminary, Alan joined 75 other clergy, including 10 rabbis, who held a prayer service in front of the Albany City Hall on August 28, 1962. Of course, those were different years. They were all arrested and spent 4 nights in jail. 2 years later, Dr. King sent another telegram to another well-known rabbi, not to you, but to me, Rabbi Cy Dresner, urging him to recruit Reform rabbis. And they all went down. This is after, I guess, it was after a convention, Alan. It was at the CCAR convention. So all you guys got in buses or trains or whatever, cars, and went down, this time to Florida, where they attempted to integrate several facilities, including a pool at a hotel. While they were, of course, arrested again, and they were in a holding cell, the rabbis wrote a group letter, which was published, entitled Why We Went, a joint letter from the rabbis arrested in St. Augustine. And shortly after that demonstration, Congress passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I don't have to tell you the rest, except that the really fascinating thing is I never knew that Alan also, later on, once he went to Chicago, won several Emmys for his production, working for the Jewish Federation there. He had a radio show on Armed Forces Radio, where he interviewed such celebrities as Ray Bradbury, Dalton Trumbo, Maya Angelou, John Cassavetes, Ali Wiesel, Rod McEwen. Okay, I should go on. And he also did a feature on the Holocaust narrated by Ellen Burstyn. Then he had even got the chance to act in Brian Song and Marcus Welby, MD. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you my first Rebbe, Alan Secher. Yeah, I should go sit down here and mute me.
Rabbi Secher, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay. So, all right. Good night, all. Your rabbi has told you everything about me and my whole story. So thank you for having me. There's nothing left to say. I love the idea that I've been invited to Cheyenne, Wyoming. I'll tell you, I love telling my story. And why is that? Because it's first person. It's a first person story, because otherwise you'd read about it in a magazine or in a history book, or you'd see a documentary on television. But here you're getting it firsthand. I made up nothing of this. It's all what I've experienced. And thank you for the patience of listening to the story. I originally told your rabbi that I needed to speak for 2.5 hours. He said a Zochenweh. I won't hear of that. So I cut it down to 2 hours. So thank you, right. All right. So here's my story as best I remember it. Now, bear in mind, this was almost 60 years ago. And so none of you, as I see in the sanctuary, are as old as me. but just those of you, try to think back 60 years in your life and try to remember, do you remember it exactly? I remember it pretty well. I don't remember what I had for breakfast, but I remember these stories. So come along with me on this story. The year is 1962. I am a rookie rabbi. I have yet to do my first service in my very first congregation in Massapequa, Long Island. My wife and I moved to Massapequa about 3 weeks before I was to do the first service. And we moved into our house so we could get the house in order and so that we could learn about the town. It was a very reformed congregation. So the phone rings about 3 days into my being there. And it was someone I remember from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. I believe that's who it was, saying, Dr. King is asking for clergy to come to Albany, Georgia, to join in the protests. King had already been in jail twice in Albany, and the Albany movement was already about, I believe, about 5 or 6 years old. In the case of the Albany movement, they wanted to integrate the entire town, not just a swimming pool or not just a restaurant, but the whole town. King had been jailed. He was out on bail. He had spent a number of days, but he was out on bail. I immediately said, of course I'll come. My training as a kid had been, you need to stand up for what is right. And right, we learn over and over again, but certainly on Passover, remember you were slaves in the land of Egypt, and do something about that now. So the next day I showed up at a church in Harlem. I met 9 other rabbis and a number of both Black and white ministers who were prepared to go to Albany. Now we drove to the south. The year before was the time of the buses that were stopped and burned, and the residents of the buses were beaten. And this time they decided for our protection, we should go in cars. Now they forgot something. We drove 4 of us, a Hillel Rabbi, Dick Israel, and I, and 2 ministers drove in a car with New York plates. Now, New Yorkers, Dave, for your old memory bank, New Yorkers don't go to Florida or to the South in the summer. So New York plates were suspect, and we worried the whole time. We got to the church in Albany, met King and his 2 lieutenants, Ralph Abernathy and Andy Young, and we were told about how to demonstrate. And the biggest how to demonstrate was, look, you could be beaten, and we want you to know that. You could be attacked by dogs, and we want you to know that. But you are not to resist, because resistance makes them the winner. You are not to resist. Now, here's what you do if you're attacked and how to sort of defend yourself, but sort of putting your head over your hand over your head and so on. But you are not to resist. The next day, And Dave, you can put up that very first slide I gave you. If it works. No, that's coming up.
If you
There
guys
are-
need to come closer to see, because, I don't know.
Nope.
You heard the joke about the two Luddites.
All right, the other one, the last one. We'll get to this one. This is very dramatic, this scene, but that's in St. Augustine. Let's try the third one. And if we can't, Dave, that's okay. As long, these two are important later on, about an hour and a half from now. Okay, let's close it then. All right, so by now when we got to Albany, the 20 or so of us from New York were joined by about another 50 or so clergy from Chicago. No more rabbis. And by the way, the 10 rabbis who went were both Reform and Conservative. And we were joined by a whole host of both Black and white ministers from Chicago. In the morning, we joined on the steps of the City Hall in Albany, and we began a prayer service. We were met at the prayer service by Sheriff Pritchett.
Yeah, that's.
And Pritchett was clear. He said, look, you guys, you have no business being here. Go back and demonstrate in the north. And we're in the midst, just like we just did a prayer service in the sanctuary, that you have no business being here. Go back up north and do your services up north. You don't belong here. I'm warning you that if you insist on staying here and praying, you will be arrested. We stayed, we didn't move. Again, Pritchett said, I'm warning you for the second time. Go back to New York and Chicago, do your prayer service there, and leave us alone. So Pritchett, we said, we ain't leaving. And Pritchett said, okay, arrest them all 75 of us. Now, so we were arrested, and we succeeded slightly for one night. We succeeded in integrating the Albany jail. They did not realize that first night there that there were Black and white prisoners. And so we shared a jail cell that very first night with some of the Black ministers. The next day, the next morning, they decided that we should be shifted to little jails on the outskirts of Albany. So I was sent to Baker County Jail. Baker County Jail was 2 little rooms. Now, some were sent to other jails. Baker County, by the way, is the home of Jimmy Carter, but Carter was not involved in this at all. But the Baker County Jail was 2 small rooms with a little bit of an anteroom section. We were about, I don't remember the exact number, but it was something like 20 guys put into a cell meant for 4 people. I tell you, it was a bit crowded. But here's more than this. The toilets didn't work. The sink didn't work. So if you needed to relieve yourself, yes, you used the toilet, but the toilet didn't work, so it overflowed. So Rabbi Halfon said 4 days, we were there 7. Some of us were there 7 days. By the end of the 7th day, the garbage on the floor was up above my ankles from the toilets and the sink. It was not a very pleasant place. They threw in a couple of black drunks and encouraged them to beat us. But the blacks heard minister, and they thought of the ministers in their church, and they became very docile. The outsiders outside the jail cells were saying, hey, you love that white man? Give that white man a hug. Give him a kiss. And these guys just changed personality. It was 7 days. Not all of us stayed those 7 days. I had agreed to say 7. And so I stayed the 7 days, but others had said, no, we got to get back. So some say 4 days, some say 3 days. I stayed, and I think with about half the crowd, stayed 7. I came back to Massapequa, and I tell you, I was a major league hero. Why? Because Time Magazine, all the TV stations, all the newspapers, the New York Times, the New York Post, they all did laudatory stories about the 20 ministers who had gone south and had been in jail. So at my very first service, you can imagine, just picture, I'm looking at the sanctuary view from the front. Imagine the sanctuary in our congregation wasn't as big, but imagine your sanctuary beyond filled with standing room only. That was my first service. Incredible. Look at that. Our new rabbi is a hero. Yay for Temple Shalom. Now I have a story to tell you that goes beyond that. Now I understand. I do have, I'm giving you some of the outline because it's a Friday night service and I talk a lot. So this happened about 2 weeks later, and it was one of the major defining moments of my rabbinate and still is. I'm hosting the youth group in my home. There's about 14 kids. The phone rings. It's the Long Island Fair Housing Council in the very next town. Now on Long Island, and Dave, you can back me up on this, there's no space between the towns. It's one town right after the other town, right after the other town. So the Long Island Fair Housing Council said, look, in the very next town that borders your town, there has been a clear discrimination of a Black couple that wanted to buy a new home. And they were told there were no homes available. Yet we know that there were at least 3 homes available. We have asked for an injunction in the Long Island court system, but that cannot take effect till Monday morning. We want to do a demonstration tomorrow morning so as to prevent anybody from buying a home, so they can't on Monday say, oops, no, all 3 homes were sold. Would you come? Of course I'll come. They said, well, can you bring anybody else? I said, well, there are 14 teenagers in my living room, and there's nothing more liberal than a teenager. Maybe unless you're living in Wyoming and Montana, but there's nothing more liberal, at least in those days on Long Island. So they said, well, we asked them if they'll come. So I turned to my 14 teenagers, told them the story, and said, how many of you would like to come tomorrow? And all 14 hands raised. Of course we'll come. I said, wait a minute. You go home tonight and ask your folks. And if your folks say yes, please meet me at the temple at 11 o'clock the next day, and we'll go together. The next morning, I get a phone call from 6 kids saying they've talked it over with their folks, and yes, they want to come. And then my phone rings. It's the president of the congregation. He said, and this, even if this was 1962, I remember this one word for word. He said, I understand you're planning on going on a demonstration. I said, yes, I am. He said, I tell you, you may not go. I may not what, Herb? You may not go. I said, why may I not go? He said, because it's not your job. Herb, what is my job? Your job is to teach them. Oh, I understand, Herb. I know that my job is to teach them. He says, no, that's not what I mean. I said, okay, what do you mean? He said, your job is to teach them Judaism. Oh, yes, Herb, that is my job. That's why you hired me. He said, no, that's not what I mean. I said, okay, Herb, what do you mean? He said, your job is to teach them the difference between right and wrong. A Zachenweg. I said, all right, Herb, I'll tell you what. Wild horses are not keeping me from that demonstration. I will call the 6 kids. Tell them they have to come on their own. I will not define myself. I will define myself as rabbi, but not the rabbi of Temple Sholem. I said, and I will tell those 6 kids they have to come on their own. 3 kids then called me back and said, it's fine, we'll meet you there. Now, I am a rebel rabbi. I've been a rebel rabbi since day one. So at my next Friday night service, the system in those days was the president of the congregation sat on the bima behind the rabbi. Time for the sermon. I stand up and I tell the story of what had happened the week before. And I say, look, congregants, you need to make a decision here. Why the hell did you hire me? Did you hire me because I played college ball in soccer? Did you hire me because I know the boogaloo and all the regular dances? I said, or did you hire me to teach Judaism and the difference between right and wrong? If you hired me for the first case, you got the wrong guy. If you hired me for the second case, we're together here. about 6 weeks later, I called the pulpit committee of the CCAR, the placement commission, and said, get me out of here, because we were not meant to be wed, this congregation and I. What were they saying to me? They were saying, it's okay if you go way to hell down there in Albany, Georgia. But the phrase is, not in my backyard. I could not do a rabbinate in that manner. If it was to teach those kids Judaism, I'm your guy. So I went from there to Mexico City. They wanted to get me as far away as they could, and they succeeded. Except the Mexico City experience was magnificent. I loved it. All right, now let's do, and I have no idea how long I'm talking, so maybe I ought to take my watch off and look. But you have to hear the St. Augustine story, because that's even more dramatic. So sit back, relax. Here we go with part B. The year is 1964. I'm at a conference of Reform rabbis in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And Rabbi Cy Dresner, who Rabbi Halfon mentioned a few moments ago, who was the most arrested rabbi in the country, had been arrested and jailed 7 times. Okay. And now that Cy Dresner died about 5 or 6 months ago, and I inherited his mantle. Now I've only been arrested twice, but so Cy Dresner got a letter from King, who King wrote in jail in St. Augustine, Florida, asking Dresner to get together a group of Reform rabbis and come to St. Augustine. That the St. Augustine system was absolutely awful, with all kinds of beating and everything bad. Would he arrange for rabbis? I immediately said yes. 16 of us said yes, and 1 layman. And the next day we flew this time to Jacksonville, I think. We were met in Jacksonville by 2 groups. The first group was a group sent to transport us to the Black church. And the second group was the Klan. Now, they weren't in robes, but we were made clear. And we were made clear, know that the Klan is going to follow your cars to get to the church, but we will protect you. And they did follow us, but they did not attack us. We went to the church, again, with King and Abernathy and Young, and we were told once again that things had been terrible, that there had been nightly demonstrations of a march from the church through the Black neighborhood, through the white neighborhood, to the local slave market, to what was the local slave market. And there had been trouble along the way. The group had been attacked by dogs, and the night before there was a shooting at the demonstration. We were told once again of how to defend yourself. We were told that Andy Young, I guess it was about a week earlier, had been beaten within the inch of his life as part of the march. But we're going to march. Now, as things happened, we went outside from the church and we were lined up in 2s the 17 of us, along with a whole host of black and whites, lined up. And as things happened, I was the front of the line. And I was paired with a young black girl. I'd say she was 27, 28, but I was paired with a black girl. And people, it was the scariest 2 hours of my life, because we were taking the exact same route where someone had been shot the night before. A cracker had crawled up a tree with a gun and fired down on the group. Now, someone was hurt. They weren't killed, but we were going that same route. Now, the National Guard had been called out, so to speak, to protect us. But who was the National Guard? Florida crackers. And boy, when we got back 2 hours later, now we sang songs, all kinds of songs. We Shall Overcome and so on, the anthems. And we sang songs and held hands. So here was this white guy with a kippah on his head walking in the front of the line. So not only did you get the N-word, but kike bastard as well. But I made it. All right, next day, our group was divided in 3. A couple of us were sent to a local Woolworths. Now, I don't know if any of you remember Woolworths, but they were sent to the lunch counter at the local Woolworths. A small group of us were sent to the Munson Motor Lodge restaurant. And that's where King had been arrested by attempting to integrate the restaurant. But the rest of us were to gather in the parking lot of the Munson Motor Lodge. Now, there was a rule at the time. There was a rule among there was a national rule that any operation that was interstate had to be integrated. Well, Munson Motor Lodge was part of a chain, but they weren't integrating. So we lined up in the parking lot, okay, of the Munson Motor Lodge in a circle, starting a prayer service. And I'd say there were about 30 of us in the circle. While in the midst of that prayer service, a car pulls up, and out of the car, and I think it was a taxi, but I don't remember for sure. A car pulls up and 7 kids jump out of the car, 5 blacks, 2 whites, all in bathing suits. They run through the parking lot, jump over a small, like 1-foot fence, and leap into the Munson Motor Lodge pool. The pool, this was June of '64. The pool is loaded with patrons, all white. The patrons immediately leap out of the pool and run away. The kids jump in. Now, Dave, the second slide that you showed, the one with the fellow and the gallon jug in his hand. Let's see if we can pull that up. No, the next one. And then we're going to get back to this. There it is. Okay. The manager, his name is Brock, is so distressed by what is going on is that he grabs 2 gallon jugs of acid And you see him there pouring the acid into the pool. Now, what he didn't know is that that acid, muriatic acid, dilutes itself when it hits water. He did not know that, nor did the kids. So you see the girl in the middle, frightened as hell, as well all of us would be, seeing somebody pouring acid. That's one of the white guys that are with her. So you are seeing 4 of the 7 right there. All right. The kids, I witnessed these kids, the most courageous act I have ever seen. They did not leave that pool. They were frightened, as you could see, but they did not leave that pool. Now, Dave, the other slide. They did not leave until you see it, the man leaping into the pool was a cop. And if you look real close, you can see the gun on his right hip. He leaps into the pool, all dressed and all in armor. And on the outside, the whites on the outside are screaming, beat him, kill him. And many of them are loaded with billy clubs. But you can see 6 of the 7 kids there. Okay, he leaps in and he does succeed in pushing him out. All 7 were arrested. The blacks were sent to jail for 3 months for this. The 2 white guys were jailed with us. The 2 white guys were, they were from somewhere in the north. I do not remember where. All right, you can take that down, Dave. So we're arrested and we are taken to jail, but first we're in a large parking lot by the jail. I saw an incredibly horrific sight. One of the cops had a cattle prod, an electric cattle prod. And there was a young girl, white. There was a young girl with a summer dress on, a light summer dress. And the cop took that electric prod, loaded it, lit it, and shoved it right up her. And I can still hear her scream to this day. The scream was, I know you can picture it. So we were sent to jail, and a number of things happened in jail. This time, we were only in jail a couple of nights, but 2 things happened in the jail. First of all, we were greeted in the jail by the head of the Ku Klux Klan, very liberal jail. The Klan, he was the sergeant of the jail. Okay? And he brought with him an attorney that he had the sheriff, and he said the attorney had referred to us rabbis as kike rabbis. And he referred to us as so-called rabbis. But he brought to us the attorney who had referred to us as kike rabbis. The attorney was the president of the congregation, berating us for coming, absolutely berating us for coming down south. We had been doing a prayer service, and in those days in 62, in most Reform congregations, you didn't wear kippot. So many of the rabbis were not. And what had happened is when we checked in, everything was taken from us. So we didn't have kippot, just everything. And in many cases, our glasses even were taken from us as we were booked. Now, we then sat around, and there was one thing. This cell was small as well. It was larger than the one in Baker County, but it was clean, and the shower and the toilet, hooray, worked. So we could shower while we were in jail. But did you ever try drying yourself with paper towels after a shower? They wouldn't give us towels. So we're sitting around and we're saying, all right, look, we're going to be here a while. What do we do? Well, we first started out telling jokes, but for how long and how many hours can you last with that? So we decided, let's talk about why we went. Why did we come to this place? What was it? And so all of us began telling, first of all, how do we write this? How do we write what we're talking about? Well, one of the guys somehow had kept a small bit of pencil in his pocket. All right, so we've got the way in which to write. Where do we find something to write on? In our cell was a Klan poster announcing a get-together of some sort. We took down the Klan poster and we wrote why we went on the back of a Klan poster. And all of us contributed. We went through the night, worked. The main inspiration of the poster, of the writing, was Rabbi Eugene Borowitz, one of the major theologians. And we wrote, and I want to read to you 3 paragraphs from there, okay? We came to St. Augustine mainly because we could not stay away. We could not say no to Martin Luther King, who we always respected and admired, and whose loyal friends we hope we shall be in the days to come. We could not pass by the opportunity to achieve a moral goal by moral means, a rare modern privilege, which has been the glory of the nonviolent struggle for civil rights. We came because we could not stand idly by our brother's blood. We had done that too many times before. We have been vocal in our exhortation of others, but the idleness of our hands too often revealed an inner silence. Silence at a time when silence has become the unpardonable sin of our time. We came in the hope that the God of us would accept our small involvement as a partial atonement for the many things we wish we had done before and often. We came as Jews who remembered the millions of faceless people who stood quietly watching the smoke rise from Hitler's crematoria. We came because we know that second only to silence, the greatest danger to man is a loss of faith in man's capacity to act. This was a powerful writing. Andy Young says that this Why We Went is as important as King's letter from Birmingham jail. Now, one other thing happened, and then I'm going to close. Goodness gracious, I've talked a lot. One other thing. It's 1964. And about 3 weeks later, because he was so moved by what he saw with that pool scene and the muriatic acid and the kids in the pool, Lyndon Johnson pushed Congress to enact the 19 Civil Rights Act, the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Now, I'm awful proud that I had a small piece in that happening. I wish there were more. I wish there were an awful lot more. I'm still involved in civil rights, and I intend to be till I no longer can do it. And Moshe, I think I've said a lot.
Well, let me take my mic back on. Would you guys like to, if you could, 3 minutes, 4 minutes on, he can't hear me. Hello.
We can hear you, Rabbi.
Yeah, okay, Alan, can you, we're very patient. Can you do 4 minutes about Whitefish and Bozeman?
Oh, boy.
Or is that, I mean, you talk beautifully. Is there a way to do that briefly?
No,
No.
no, it's not, it's not.
He said to me this afternoon, he wrote me sacking.
Oh, yeah, for that one, Moshe, you got to bring me back, because this one is my wife and I together,
I see.
because she was one of the major victims of the Whitefish event.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So I was there and I was part of it, but the original harassment was a young kid who was known as a faggot kike bastard. Tanya Gersh, a real estate lady, Rabbi Francine, Francine Roston, and Ein Albert. On this, they were all, their photos were all up. In my case, it was just my name. But now that'll be a little shorter. That won't be like about the hour that I just took up.
Okay.
But my suggestion is, if anybody either on Zoom or in the sanctuary would like to ask me questions, by all means, or I guess it's getting close to time to say Laila Tov.
Okay. Well, I will summarize this by saying that the funny thing is that I know two rabbis from Montana. On May 20th, if this works, if you agree to this, we'll talk it over. Also on a Friday night, we're having Ed Staffman, who is Representative Ed Staffman now. I don't have a bias towards Montana. It just happens that I know two rabbis from Montana. But both Ed and you, Alan, but you all got involved. The short version is that when the neo-Nazis started operating, and there were some very hateful things that happened, both in Whitefish and Bozeman, they created a resistance, but it was a different kind of resistance. Yeah, thank you for respecting the time of the community. Would you guys like to ask a question or two? Just
kind of stands for itself.
It does, yes. Well, I wanted to point out that the other living rabbi from that group is another colleague of mine, Jerry Goldstein in Los Angeles. Jerry's younger than you, I guess.
A year.
A year younger, yeah. And did Richard Levy go to that group?
Yes, Richard Levy was part of us.
And so when I heard about side wrestlers passing, that's what sparked me to call you, because I said, wait a minute, there's only two left. Well,
only 2 of the 17 are left.
Yes. Well, bis 120. You look healthy. And so, all right, anybody? Okay, so I guess it's good. It's good to move on. Let's go to the Aleinu and then the Kaddish. And I have these remarks about the Kaddish. And I'm not going to belabor them. We'll have to have you back, Alan. Aleinu is on page 282 and 586 in the home version.
bottom of the page. And in the spirit of tonight's talk, let us continue to build a world of justice, of hope and faith and freedom. Aleinu l'shabeach l'Adonai l'teinu ha'aretz שלא שמנו ברצות, ולא שמנו במשמרות האדמה, שלא שמתם להם וגורלנו בכל העולם.
Finish it in minutes or something. Oh, sure.
Flip the page. שהוא נוטה שמיים, יוסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו, בגבי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו, אפס זולתו, כך כתוב בתורתו, בידעתו היום, והשבע אותה. I know I don't sing it exactly how Jeff does. Adonai, hu Elohim, Shamayim imal, the Haaretz, mitachat, Enod. To the end of 287 or 591 at home. V'ne'emar, ve'aya Adonai. למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. You can be seated as we prepare to read the names of those for whom we're mourning at this time. I found this most recently today. So in the Tel Aviv terrorist attack that happened this week, two guys, Tomer Morad and Eitam Magini, who were both about 27 or 28, were killed on the spot. They were friends since childhood. But today it was announced that a third man, Barak Lufan, died in the hospital. And I don't remember the numbers of the wounded, 17, 15. And Gerda Weissman Klein, who I mentioned earlier, died on Sunday. And she has written several books. You can look her up online. And to that, I would add the martyrs of the civil rights movement. What is it, Jason? Here, these are the seats? These are the seats?
Goodman, Schwerner,
Schwerner, and Cheney. We have right here.
Dr. King.
And Dr. King. We have a chair dedicated to the memory of Dr. King. And our recent Niftar list from this year includes Billy Novick, Marilyn Wiesenberg, Roz Kaufman, Pat Wolf, Donald Falk, Dr. Charles Kukel, and the list from this week includes, I have it here somewhere, for this week of April 8th and 9th, Michael Wolf, Harold Rubens, Joanne Cook, Sam Levin, Susan Roberta Cohen, Edith Fox, Herschel Saphir, Annie Stark, Chester Waldman, and next week we'll have some more. You know what? I don't know if Jeff's online. I'm going to read the list for next week because we will be doing our Seder, and we may not get to a Kaddish next week. Dan Bergman, this is for next week. Dan Bergman, Julia Weissman, Alex Semrich, Molly Bemmel, Morris Garden-Schwartz, Isidore Pasternak, Robert Persky, Sam Stark, there's a name you know, Diane Maxim Bogdanov, Lena Galensky, there's another name that we probably know, Charles Rosenberg, Elsie Spaulding, Fanny Vinegar Smith, Esther Rose Vega, Pearl Wissenberg, Ben Wolf, and Lottie Levine. In memory of all these and all the martyrs of our people and of all peoples, those who wish to may rise for the Kaddish on page 294 or 598 in the click book at home. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, V'alma yivarach yivutei v'amlich malchutei. V'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'bizman kariv b'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevarach ve'olam u'lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh. Yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kusha b'richu. Le'elav min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata v'amiran v'alma v'ivru amen. Yehei shlama Rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. Bad Rabbi, I'm sorry, I again forgot to ask if there's any others who want to add anything. It's perfectly okay to do it post-spot.
Vedic Samuel Kavina.
Thank you. And I apologize. Okay, you may be seated, and Phyllis is going to have some announcements, and then we have our closing hymn, Man Come Into Egypt. I might want to mention again, you don't have to depend on me to find out about Rabbi Secher. I Googled him and found all 35 YouTube videos that he did, including a TED Talk, and he was interviewed by different papers. So you can just find out everything you want to know about him, except his home address.
Thank you all for coming, both here and online. Thank you, both rabbis. Please join us on that afterwards here. Sunday at noon, we have a sisterhood meeting. Not surprisingly, we're going to be talking about Seder, among other things. Monday night, 5:30, Bibles and beer via Zoom. And next Friday, our Seder. The Seder begins at 6 o'clock. The doors open at 5:30. We check everybody in. We have approximately 75 people coming. You can do the math. It'd be really helpful to those of us who will be frantically checking you in if you could come closer to the 5:30 rather than the 6 o'clock. And we're really, really excited to have so many people. And I think that's it for the next week.
Tomorrow morning.
actually.
Tomorrow morning, too.
I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
sorry.
Yes. Services tomorrow morning. Zoom opens at 9:30 and services start at 10. Anything else?
Well, looking way ahead, but you'll get it in the newsletter. Save the date of Thursday, 11:30, if you're free during the day, the April 28th, for our Yom HaShoah program, which will be at the F.E. Warren base this year. They asked me to be their speaker. You'll be covering it, I'm sure, or something like that. So I will be there. Dave will be there as part of that. And on that Sunday, April 24th, I'm going to show a movie here in the social hall. The movie is Defiance, which stars Daniel Craig and Liv Schreiber, among others. All right, so as I said, go back to the song sheet or the back of the song sheet, and you'll enjoy this instead of Adon Olam tonight, a little bit of a change. So you can listen to the lyrics and you can get it, that it really, it's talking about Moses, but it's obvious that it was also talking about Dr. King. There is a man come into Egypt, and Moses is his name. When he saw the grief upon us, in his heart there burned a flame. In his heart there burned a flame, oh Lord. In his heart there burned a flame. When he saw the grief upon us, in his heart there burned a flame. There is a man come into Egypt. His eyes are full of light, like the sun come up in Egypt, come to drive away the night, come to drive away the night, oh Lord, come to drive away the night, like the sun come up in Egypt, he's
come to drive away the night. There is a man, you can harmonize, coming to Egypt. He's come for you and me. On his lips, a word is singing, and the word is liberty. And the word is liberty. Oh Lord, the word is liberty. On his lips, the word is singing, and the word is... Now I changed one lyric here just to update. There is a man coming to Egypt to free all women and men. We will follow him to freedom. No wear those chains again. Never, never wear those chains again. Never wear those chains again. We will follow him to freedom. Never wear those chains again. Oh, no applause, please. Oneg, joy, happiness, freedom. And by the way, enjoy this bread because you won't see it much longer. Thank you so much, Alan and Ina.
Can I say something?
What's that?
Can I say something before we close? Okay. The additional pleasure for me here was to have a reunion with one of my kids. It's hard to picture us both way back then, Moshe, but to see success and your joy in where you are. Welcome to Cowboy Land. Okay. I dub you the new Yiddisher cowboy.
The Cheyenne Rebbe, I'm calling myself. Cheyenne Rebbe.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor. Okay. Good Shabbos, everybody. You want to, I'll sing out. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Jason and Phyllis. And thank you, everybody, for coming.
Dave, thank you.
Rabbi, thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you. I'm going to send you an email so that we can get an address to send you something to say thank you.
Okay. You want me to give you an address right now while we're still on?
It's good if you do it. Everybody in the
Oh, okay.
tool will hear.
All right.
I ain't going to forget you. I'll make sure he takes care of you. And we'll be in touch. He's after me to come and visit him already.
But thank you very much. This was wonderful. A great thing. We really appreciate it. All right, I'm going to end the Zoom call. So, and for you to have the rest of your evening. So thank you very much again. And I'll be in touch.
No, most of us